So this morning I asked the audience if they owned a token, and everybody raised their hand. But then when I asked how many of them were using it for utility, aside from trading, and only 10% really were doing that. So that told me that we're still not there yet in terms of token usage. And does that number surprise you, the 10%?
No, it doesn't surprise me. I've been trying to transact with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies for a long time, and it's not that rewarding to do, honestly, right? To pay for something in Bitcoin, to send somebody some Bitcoin. On one hand, it's a little clunky, and on the other hand, it doesn't feel great that you're spending something that you think is going to go up in value. My daughter posted a tweet 2 days ago where she said she took a little screenshot of her Coinbase app. 3 years ago, she said, "Dad, send me a Bitcoin," and I sent her a Bitcoin. And back then, I don't know what it was. It was like, sub $100, and now it's 2,000, right? So I didn't think much of sending her a Bitcoin back then, but I'm not sure I'd send her a Bitcoin today.
You would think twice. Yeah.
And I love my daughter.
The bar is getting higher. So you and I have talked about the business models that the tokens enable.
Right.
So what are some of the business models that you would be excited about and you're seeing?
Well, there's a lot of business models that I'm excited about. I think near term, a lot of it's going to be around building infrastructure, right? If you look at what Bitcoin has done, it's basically enabled a massive compute infrastructure to get built up around hashing transactions. And that's kind of amazing, right? So if you think about where we are today in blockchain-based architecture, it's kind of like where the internet was in the early mid-90s. We had to build a lot of infrastructure. We had to build a lot of bandwidth. We had to build a lot of server infrastructure. We had to build a lot of technology that sort of built the fundamental technology architecture. And I think we've still got a lot of ways to go with blockchain. So we need decentralized compute, we need decentralized storage, we need decentralized identity, we need a lot of things like that. And so I think that the most interesting utility that I think we will see people taking advantage of in the near term is around those sorts of things.
So many of those are kind of tied into a protocol. So
right.
How about applications?
Well, I think applications will come, but I think that the time, I'm sort of giving you the USV playbook, right? We think that the time to invest in the application layer of blockchain is a few years out, that we still have a lot more infrastructure to build. There were some early, if you use the internet, I love the line that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. If you think back to the early days of the internet, most of the money was made in infrastructure, routers, big bandwidth, CDNs, Netscape, which was really infrastructure both on the server side, on the browser side. And there were a few applications, Yahoo, eBay, Amazon, Google came late, in the late 90s. I'm sure there will be some applications that will emerge relatively early, but if you think about what's happened in the last 15 years, since maybe 2002, we've got Facebook, we got Twitter, we got Airbnb, we got Uber, we got SoundCloud, and we got all these other services that we use every single day, and that really the last 15 years have been when all these applications have proliferated because the technology was fully built out. I remember 2003, 2004, post-internet crash, but before the internet kind of got going again, there was this whole thing about how all of a sudden you could start a company with like 2 or 3 people. In the late 90s, you couldn't start a company with 2 or 3 people, right? You had to build too much, but the stack kind of fully got there, and you could do it. So I think that the applications, the blockchain-based applications that are going to get built in the next 2 or 3 years are going to require a lot more in terms of the stack than the blockchain applications that will get built 5 or 10 years from now.
Is it because we would be expecting to do things that we could not do before? It seems that right now the blockchain is trying to emulate the web. Like this is this, but not on the web. It's on a decentralized
That's
model.
a great observation,
not,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years of the web was emulating the offline world. We took a magazine, we put it on the internet, or we put an auction, we put it on the internet, or we took a newspaper, we put it on the internet. And it wasn't until really the second decade of the internet that we started to see what the internet was really made for. Things like Facebook, that were truly new things that could never have existed. Again, there are some examples in the mid-90s of things that were truly native internet. eBay would be one, I think. But I think really it took almost a decade for people to truly understand what a native internet application was. And it'll probably be a long time before people truly understand what a native blockchain application is.
But the concept of earning cryptocurrency by just doing something or being there, I mean, that's a fairly new concept that we couldn't do before so easily. And then you look at, I mean, I'm going to use Steemit as one example, and Kik is going to do that. They're going to allow, by just being there. Before we were being there, we were doing stuff, but we were not earning anything. And now we're going to be able to earn something and respend it. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting, and I think what Steem and what Kik are doing, those may be some of the first sort of native blockchain type things that will emerge. Because I think a lot of people are tired of participating in systems where they provide all the value and get none of the compensation. And, blockchain provides crypto tokens or cryptocurrencies provide a mechanism to flip that around. And maybe what happens is that the people who power these applications end up with all the money, and the person who built the application ends up with very little of it.
Speaking of money, so now one of the benefits of these ICOs or token sales is that a startup can raise a lot of money very, very quickly.
Right.
And are you concerned that this is creating a little bit of a risk for them, because USV and some VCs believe that too much money is not necessarily a good thing. So now they suddenly have a lot of money, and we don't know exactly how they're spending it. So is this a risk now in having too much money and losing some discipline potentially?
I think it can be, and it will be for some teams. There are some teams that seem to have done a good job with it. How much money did the Ethereum project raise in their token sale?
18 million US.
Right, and they've done a lot with that.
And they lost some of it because Bitcoin went down in price, and they had lots of it locked. And so in real money, they probably had 12 million.
Right,
something
and they've
like
done
that.
a lot with it. So
Yes.
that strikes me as a pretty lean and mean group. But there will be, for sure, teams that raise 30, 40, 50 million dollars and kind of get lost because they have too much money. I think Blockstream suffers from that. Blockstream has raised so much money, and what have they actually built? What has shipped?
I'm not sure. They announced something this week at Consensus. That other conference. So what do traditional VCs then have to do to survive this new way of raising money? Because startups are thinking, well, I can go the VC route and sweat and be rejected 25 times, or I can go ICO and it's easy money and raise once. Like there's this belief that, well, why raise 4 times? Although one of the panels thought that we might see multiple raises again if there's discipline. But now they tend to do a one-shot deal.
Right. Well, I think VCs will either find their way into the sector and provide value in it, or they won't. there's still going to be plenty of places, I think, where VCs can, play the traditional venture capital game. But for lots of entrepreneurs who choose to go in this direction, they can absolutely bypass VCs and do these ICOs. But I think you'll also see VCs participating in ICOs and also pre-sales. Pre-sale in particular strikes me as a place where VCs may be well suited to play because it's before the tokens are live. Teams may want to raise, a quick $1 million or $2 million and not have to go through the whole rigmarole of doing an ICO, and there might be an opportunity for VCs to come in and participate there. So we'll see. And I also think certain VCs, I think we're one of them, and there are a few others, when they get behind a project, may enhance the allure of that project to the broader community. If the VC has a good reputation and in the blockchain sector thinks that they know what they're doing, then that could be a positive.
Yes. Do you think that something could spoil the current euphoria that's going on right now? Because it seems that everything's going well, everything's going up. This conference is packed, and we had to turn down people because everybody wants to talk tokens.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong. We've seen it a bunch already with Bitcoin. You have scams, you have crimes, you have hacks, you have forks. I think we're going to see an important evolution of Ethereum as they try to move from proof of work to proof of stake. I think that Bitcoin will have to execute this compromise that was apparently hatched this week with the miners and the Bitcoin core developers, and that'll be something to watch as well. So and certainly some of the newer tokens that have come out and have gone up in value have plenty of risks around them, and they may or may not be able to sustain themselves. So, I like to think of these things as like sort of a line that's going up and to the right, but around that you have a big sort of swing, so that you can have a period of time where the sector is going up, but the values are coming down just because of market cycles. And so, I fully expect that we will see, downdrafts and upticks, and it'll be that way.
You think we might get something like the 99, 2000, I don't want to use the word crash or bubble, because nothing can repeat itself, but is it going to take some kind of reset? Because some things do not make sense, valuation-wise. Things like appear like the sky is the limit, but we know the sky is not the limit.
Right.
At some point in time, things equalize.
Yeah, I think it's very likely that that'll happen, and I think one of the things that a lot of the investors who are active in the sector are thinking about is how far are we away from that? I think that there's a ways more that things are going to go before we get to a point where the whole thing could come undone in a massive way. Is it 5x from here? Is it 10x from here? Is it 20x from here? I don't really know, but I do think at some point we will see that.
Yeah, I believe that as well. Let's take 2 or 3 questions for Fred from the audience. And if we have an extra couple of mics, so we could have somebody go and find the...
You need a volunteer to do that.
Yeah, I need a yellow T-shirt person. Or just start speaking out, and I'll repeat it.
Hi, Fred. I'm trying to reconcile... I'm a startup guy. I'm trying to reconcile the ICO process from a typical startup fundraise process. And I must confess, I don't really understand the appeal. You raise a big pot of money, very little ability to go back to the pool in one shot, and you give away a large percentage of whatever the asset is. What's the appeal of that compared to doing it in more of a traditional startup-like thing where you sell a little bit, make progress, you sell a little bit more, maybe at a higher price? It just seems out of whack to me.
Well, if you think about it as just a way to finance your company, then you're not really thinking about it properly. The way to think about it is that the token that you're offering is also the native monetization model for your business. And if you execute your business well, the value of that token should rise as the utility of the product that you ship goes up in value. And so even though you may be selling a lot of the supply of the token right away, the value of that will increase substantially if you're successful. And you potentially can capture a lot of value in the small bit that you've retained for doing it. So it is a very different model, and we have seen examples of that work, right? So you told me that, I don't know if this is public or not, but you told me that you thought that Vitalik still owns a bunch of Ethereum.
But
Ether.
not a lot. I mean, it's public.
It is public.
Yeah. He ended up with 1%, but he sold some of it. The estimate is maybe he has 0.5% or less.
Right.
But it's worth a lot.
Right. $1 billion?
I'm not sure. Even the foundation now has a lot. I mean, not a lot in terms of quantity, but in value. So if you're patient, I think the network, the overall value will reward you.
Right, and the other thing is that these aren't necessarily companies, right? These are projects. I think that maybe the better way to think about them is like an open source project as a company. So it's just I think a very different approach to. I actually don't even think that you should think about it as building a company. I think you should think about it as building technology and shipping technology that can be used by a massive number of people in more of an open source type of business model, and how one captures that value for themselves, and the team captures value, and the ecosystem captures value.
There was a question there on the left.
Yep.
There. Yep.
You recently tweeted about rare Pepe trading cards, and I'm curious what your opinion is about that.
Well, Rare Pepe cards are built on top of Counterparty, which is built on top of Bitcoin, and it's a little bit of a clunky experience. It honestly took me a few days to figure out how to do the whole thing. And, the wallets aren't really all that awesome either. So there's a whole bunch of things about it that I don't think are great. But the thing that I love about it is that people are buying and selling rare assets that have a certain limited supply. They go up and down in value, and that they're verified on the blockchain. So you know that if I bought, a rare Pepe from William, that he actually doesn't own it anymore, and I do. The same way that a Bitcoin or an Ether token would be traded, and for me, that is kind of evidence. And that is, by the way, a real utility use of a token, right? So the fact that we're buying and selling and trading rare Pepes, that is actually utility.
Somebody offered to do a rare Pepe of me to get into the conference when they heard it was fully packed. And
you know what? I would pay a lot of money for a rare Pepe of you. A lot of money being like $22.
Well, that's what you paid for yours.
Yeah, but it wasn't of you. So anyway, I think you can think about it in terms of like lots of digital assets. That this is an interesting way for people to start thinking about making digital art and selling digital art. And we used to think about things like digital rights management or watermarking or all these sort of things that didn't work. And I have a feeling like this actually might be the right answer for all of that.
Great. Next one. Who has the mic?
Yes. I have it here. So you said that we needed like 10 years to figure out what internet is good for. How long do you think it's going to take to figure out what blockchain is good for?
I was really talking about like applications, right? Because I think we've already started to figure out some of the things it's good for in terms of infrastructure. But I think my guess is 10 years. But then the question is, when does that 10 years start? Did it start in 2009? Did it start, at this conference? I don't know. It probably has started, right? The clock has definitely started, but I don't know. I'd say by the end of this decade, we should be starting to see some native blockchain applications really achieving mass adoption.
One of the predictions on one of the panels was, maybe it was Jake, is in less than 3 years, the top 10 currencies will not be any of the current top 10 currencies.
I have a hard time believing that. I just think that there's so much liquidity and vetting that has happened with Bitcoin and now Ethereum. I think the thing that these blockchains and these crypto tokens do is that they prove themselves, right? That they prove themselves out in the public every single day.
Over time.
Over time.
Yeah.
And people build more and more confidence in them.
Yeah.
And, I do think that we're going to see a multiple blockchain world. I'm not suggesting that there's going to be one blockchain that'll capture all of the value, but I have a hard time imagining a world where the big public blockchains that we know today are not among the most important ones.
Do you have a position in terms of whether you believe in vertical specific blockchains or more general purpose platforms like Ethereum is, where you can build whatever you want on them?
Well, I think we're seeing that certain things like anonymity is really important to a subset of the use cases and a subset of the community. So I think that we now have a couple of blockchains that a big part of their value is anonymity, and I think that there will be at least one that persists and provides that value. Is that what you meant by vertical?
Yeah, like vertical specific one, it does just one thing, or it could be, Steemit is a vertical specific, it's content specific.
Yeah.
Zcash is privacy specific.
Yeah. Well, I do think that when you start to get into application-specific blockchains, I think that we might actually see those getting built on top of the core blockchains, right? Like Steam may ultimately port itself on top of something like Ethereum, right? Not to say that they will, but they could. We've seen a number of blockchains do that, right? You told me that storage was on top of Counterparty, and now it's going to Ethereum.
Correct.
Right. And, so I think that you will see some of these things move.
There will be some interoperability eventually.
Right.
Let's take one short question more, and that's it. Okay.
Sure. All right. So you've talked a lot about unbundling in the past, and it kind of strikes me that decentralization is either a form of unbundling or has some of the same characteristics of unbundling. And I'm just curious how you see, regardless of whether or not tokens are at play or not, how do you see venture capital unbundling or being decentralized over time? How do you think about the decentralization of the capitalization of businesses and maybe venture capital in specific, or in particular?
Well, the venture capital business, has always been 3 or 4 functions basically delivered in one package. So we manage money for other people. We are capital allocators. We are governance providers. And, sometimes we do a few other things, like we may actually get operationally active in our companies from time to time. So I don't think that you necessarily have to have all those things in one package. Capital allocation, for example, could happen just out on the public blockchain, right? People can buy and trade and sell securities, and the capital will flow wherever it needs to flow. So maybe we get out of that business. Maybe we get out of the business of managing money for other people. But I still think that there's a role for people who, do what venture capitalists do, to get involved in these projects and provide value to them, for example, we're an investor in Protocol Labs, and my partner Brad is on the board of Protocol Labs, and we've been very involved with Juan and the team thinking about how they're going to do the Filecoin offering and helping them think through, legal issues and things like that, and allocation issues, how much to sell, how much to hold back, all those sorts of things. So I think, there's still a role for active investors to play a role in the sector. And I don't know, I really don't have a crystal ball to know exactly what that's going to look like 5 or 10 years from now. But I firmly believe that, the entrepreneurs and the teams that are building these projects, want relationships with people like us, and we'll figure out a way to be involved with them.
Great. So a couple of quick questions to wrap up, very short answers. Do you have a wish for this space by the end of the year? You wish something, would you like to see something happen by the end of this year? It's a tough one.
Well, I'd like to see a proof of stake system operate at the kind of scale that Bitcoin operates at. I think that proof of work, particularly the way that Bitcoin does it, is very, very inefficient from an energy perspective.
Sure.
And I would like, the blockchain sector. I know that proof of stake works in systems, and I know that there are systems out in the wild where it's been working for quite a while, but we don't have anything at the magnitude of what the Bitcoin network is doing right now, and I'd like to see that.
Do you think Ethereum will catch up to Bitcoin in value?
In market cap?
Yeah.
Well, I already predicted that. I
You
predicted
did?
that last week.
Okay, well.
By the end of this year, by
You
the way.
haven't changed your mind since last week.
Well, there was a reporter who was interviewing me, and I couldn't see the
Oh, yeah,
reporter, and I
Bloomberg.
had a little thing in my ear, and she said, give me a stock prediction, and I don't really have a stock prediction to give her, so I gave her that one. I'm not even sure that I honestly feel that, but I went on the line, and and now I gotta
And
do
then the
it.
price went up.
No, I don't think I have anything to do with that.
Okay, thanks very much, Fred.
Thanks.